Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports.
As we introduce the next head football coach of the University of Alabama, Kalen DeBoer.
Quite a happening this past Saturday afternoon inside the North Zone at Bryant-Denny Stadium. I was there, and it was thoroughly enjoyable with Greg Byrne introducing Kalen DeBoer. Welcome into Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports, alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com. I'm WVUA 23 Sports Director Gary Harris, and we're loaded tonight, Rodney. The Crimson Tide moving to the next chapter in football program history by introducing a new head coach this past Saturday. Associated Press Coach of the Year, Kalen DeBoer. The new head man for the Crimson Tide led Washington to the College Football Playoff National Championship game this season, falling to top-ranked Michigan in the championship game out in Houston. The Huskies, though, finished the season with a 14-1 record in 9 seasons as a head coach, beginning at his alma mater, NAIA Sioux Falls, then at Fresno State, and then at Washington. DeBoer has a career record. I know you've heard this, but it's still, just let it sink in. 104-12. Winners win. He won 3 national championships at Sioux Falls, where he also was an outstanding player in both football and baseball. DeBoer made it clear that he's perfectly okay with Nick Saban staying around and being a part of the program, Rodney, and giving his feedback. In fact, Coach Saban's going to have an office, not in the football complex, but in Bryant-Denny Stadium. But I really thought it was interesting how Coach DeBoer embraced him. Coach Saban and Miss Terry were right there on the front row, and he didn't run from him. He said, hey, he's the best to ever do it. Why wouldn't I lean on him?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of coaches out there. Listen, I've talked to some people that talked to some prominent head football coaches. I'm talking just today that said, look, I wouldn't have followed Nick Saban. Kalen DeBoer's not intimidated. And I think that's the one thing you look for in a successful coach, is a guy that really is not intimidated. As you said, Gary, he embraces the greatness that's been here with Nick Saban and what Nick Saban can do to help him in this transition as he moves forward.
Let's look back at his career. It wasn't that long ago he was at Sioux Falls. And then in 2019, he was the offensive coordinator for Tom Allen in Indiana. Then 2 years at Fresno State, and obviously did a great job at Washington. But it's hard to imagine, 5 years ago, for him, for us, for anybody, that Kalen DeBoer would be following the greatest coach in college football history and taking over the most historic program in college football history at the University of Alabama. But here we are.
Yeah, here we are. He did a fantastic job. He paid his dues. He's coached 9 seasons. 7 of those 9 seasons, he's won at least 11 games. It's a phenomenal record. Again, a lot of people say, well, he doesn't have ties to this part of the country. I'm like you, Gary. If you're a winner, if you know how to build a program, it really doesn't matter. He's going to have a lot of people on his staff that have ties to this area. He's a guy that, when you look at him at the University of Washington, he took that program over. The year before, they were 4-8. The last 2 years, those 2 years in Seattle, he was 25-3, and as Gary mentioned, he played for the national championship. The guy is one of the top coaches in America.
He is an offensive-minded coach. Nick Saban was a defensive-minded coach with a defensive background. He's got an offensive background. That will be different. We haven't had, an offensive-minded coach as far as a background is concerned in a long time around here. That dynamic at work, how do you see it?
No, I think you certainly have that, and they've got a great track record. He and the offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, who is also going to be joining him here, have a tremendous track record of success offensively, Gary. But again, I think when you look defensively, although they weren't quite what you would expect, maybe for a team that competed for the national championship, I think they were 96th in the country in total defense. But I think he's putting together a staff that there's going to be an emphasis on defense. Again, he was only at Washington 2 years. He inherited a lot of those players that they had. Their front 7 talent probably wasn't anything like what he's going to have here. So there were some things that he was shorthanded. They had some deficiencies that he inherited. But I think he wants to build a program that is not just offensive oriented, but is a well-rounded program in all areas.
Well, speaking of the staff, that's the first order of business, and it is happening. Although none of the hires or expected hires have been made official by the university, there are several coaches that we are confident are already on board. Here is Coach DeBoer talking about building a staff and how he wants to do it.
He says, I always am a believer that you build around your coordinators. I sat as an assistant coach in a meeting room too many hours to not truly understand that a coordinator needs to have his people as best as possible. There's some people I'm going to bring up, but I want that stamp of approval from the coordinator that this is a group that they can thrive working with.
All right, the defensive coordinator hire is pending, but it's going to happen. Kane Womack. Womack has already resigned from South Alabama, where he was the head coach for 3 years, put together a 22-16 record, led them to a 10-win season in 2022, their first ever bowl victory this past season. Went to Stillwater, Oklahoma on the week 3 of the 2023 season and blew out the Oklahoma State Cowboys, who were a heck of a football team, played for the Big 12 championship, beat Oklahoma. He's making $810,000. He's expected to double that or more. Rodney, what are your thoughts on Kane Womack coming in as the defensive coordinator?
I think he has a really good track record. I talked to some people, Gary, that have known him since back at the Ole Miss when his dad was a really good defensive coordinator there for Hugh Freeze, and they said a lot of really good things about him. But you look at his track record, the things that he did, how he developed that defense at South Alabama. They were top 15, top 20 defense, and did a really fantastic job. And everyone you talk to down in Mobile has said, look, we hate to see him leave. This is a guy that we really had a lot of confidence in leading our program. You talk about the experience he's had. He's really young. I mean, he's still young.
I think 36, maybe?
Yeah, he's 36. He can relate really well to the players. And the people I've talked to down there talk about how he has been a tremendous recruiter, has a lot of contacts, not only in Mobile, but in the Panhandle of Florida. So I think that's really good when you're talking about having people who understand this area. And,
of course, like you said, Mobile, fertile recruiting ground. He's got ties. He's got contacts there, as he does throughout the state with high school coaches, because South Alabama recruited the state heavily. So that's big, too. Also, some news this afternoon that was breaking, according to ESPN. DeBoer is also expected to hire another FBS head coach, Maurice Linguist, the head coach at Buffalo. He will probably coach the secondary. This guy's got an impressive resume when you look at all the stops he's had.
Yeah, he really does. I mean, he's coached in the NFL. He was a cornerbacks coach with the Dallas Cowboys, coached the secondary there, has been in the SEC. I know a lot of people say, well, what about some SEC flavor? He's been at Texas A&M. He's been at Mississippi State. He was coaching at Michigan. He's been the last couple of years as a head coach at the University of Buffalo, where he's done a nice job. So this guy's a really good pickup, because not only, Gary, is he noted as a really, really good secondary coach, he's a top-notch recruiter.
And on the offensive side, several coaches expected to come over from Washington, led by their highly acclaimed offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb, a gentleman that Nick Saban tried to hire just last year before he wound up hiring Tommy Rees from Notre Dame.
We can say a lot of good things about Ryan Grubb. I mean, you mentioned it right there, how Nick Saban tried to hire him. When they took over in 2022, he was taking over an offense that averaged 323 yards a game. His first year, they're 515 yards a game. They were averaging 21 points a game. His first year, they're averaging 39 points a game, Gary. They were the #1 passing offense in the country the year that they took over, averaging 369 yards per game. So, look, they've developed an explosive passing attack. They run the ball well, too. This is an offense that this year ranks second in the nation in passing. So it's going to be really exciting. It's going to be an explosive offense. They had an 1,100-yard rusher. They had a couple of 1,000-yard receivers. Of course, we know about Michael Penix. Great quarterback, finished runner-up in the Heisman, put up a lot of numbers.
And, of course, familiarity is important. It is expected that Robert Gillespie, running backs coach, and Freddie Roach, defensive line coach, will be holdovers from the Nick Saban staff. All right, it's time now for Coach Talk. Alabama Director of Athletics Greg Byrne shares how the search came together and how he went about as a one-person search committee finding Alabama's next head coach.
I'll tell you, as soon as I sat down with Coach DeBoer, and Nicole was there, and his wife, and then Regina, when we sat down 2 days ago in a hotel room in Seattle, I was like, not that long into it, I'm like, this could be our guy.
Here is a little bit of a timeline. Last Wednesday, head coach Nick Saban informed the team that he was retiring. It was a surprise to most. Byrne, though, was already on top of it. He told the players, give him 72 hours to find a new head coach. He needed only 49, and he gets the guy who led his team to the national championship. Let's talk about Greg Byrne. He has a lot of experience doing this. He does it his way. He doesn't hire a search firm. He doesn't involve anybody else, but kudos to him. And this is the guy that hired Nate Oats. He's hired other coaches here at the University of Alabama. I like like the way he handles his business, man. He just gets to it, and he doesn't leak anything out, and the next thing you know, he's standing up there introducing the head coach.
Yeah, and he made a really good point, I thought, in his the press conference, the introductory press conference of Kalen DeBoer. He said, look, his dad had been an AD. He learned a lot from him in terms of coaching, watching coaches, how they coach, as they progress throughout their careers, and always keeping a list, Gary. I think that's the one thing about Greg Byrne. He always has a list of coaches in every sport. If he needs a guy, who would be his top guys? And you look at Kalen DeBoer. I've been hearing for over 2 months now that with all the rumors going around about Nick Saban, if that were to happen, who would be the guy? And every time it was Kalen DeBoer.
Yeah, and I like what Byrne says too. He always asks a simple question: would I want my son or daughter to play for this coach before he hires them? Well, still to come on Tighter Insider Television, Isaiah Bond and a number of other players leaving after Saban's retirement. We'll have the latest on the portal transfers. Also, men's basketball. Tell you what, that pre-conference schedule paid off. They lost some games, but they're 3-0 in the SEC and playing again tonight at home against Missouri. We'll have the latest. And we'll get to your phone calls, emails, and tweets. As always, the phone number 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. You're watching the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide. The award-winning Tighter Insider TV will return right after this timeout.
One of the things I encouraged the team to do was, you guys all need to play for each other. You'll have good coaches. You'll learn more things from more different people that can enhance your development. And you guys got to trust in that and believe in that. I'm going to be here. They're giving me an office in the stadium. And I said, I can get on your butt from there just like I can from on the field.
And welcome back to TITV. Nick Saban last week with ESPN College Game Days. Reese Davis alongside Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris. With the news of Nick Saban retiring came news that some players just decided that they didn't want to go on as an Alabama football player without the legendary coach. Last Friday, Crimson Tide wide receiver Isaiah Bond, the star of the Iron Bowl, entered the transfer portal. And he, of course, has already wound up at Texas, hearing big NIL deal there. That has a lot to do with these guys leaving, too. Bond said that Saban's retirement was the main reason, but I was told, from what I think is a pretty good source, that he was already in the decision-making process of going to Texas before Coach Saban retired, but we'll take his word for it. ESPN also reported that when Kalen DeBoer came on board, he tried to talk to Bond about staying, but he did not get a response, and Bond committed to Texas, as we said, and he'll be out there with Sark. Well, since the new head coach Kalen DeBoer was introduced, 4 other Alabama players have entered the NCAA portal. The most recent, defensive back Trey Amos, along with freshman defensive back Des Ricks, freshman defensive back Antonio Kite, tight end Amari Nyblack, who had a big year, 20 catches for 347 yards and 4 touchdowns. Rodney, that's a lot of talented, in addition to Bond, that's a lot of talented football players right there.
You look at Des Ricks, he's a 5-star corner, young player, obviously, this year. But, Trey Amos, he stepped in for Kool-Aid McKinstry in that SEC championship game against Georgia, did a bang-up job. Look, but here's the one thing. Remember this now. He can still come out of that portal. He could come back to Alabama. It's a possibility. Amari Nyblack, look, a really talented player. I thought he probably would fit well in this offense. He's extremely talented. We've talked about him many, many times before on what we thought his potential was, and, I hate to lose him.
And, of course, a number of players leaving Alabama before Nick Saban retired as well. All right, Caleb Downs is a guy, I know your board's lit up with it. I get so many messages. In fact, today I just started saying any news on Caleb Downs, and I would just say, well, he's still here. I'm sure if he goes in the portal, we'll all know it. But his name is rumored as a guy who might look to leave. Freshman of the year, one of the best football freshmen in Alabama history. Of course, Travaris Robinson going to Georgia. That opens up even more speculation about Caleb Downs. What do you think is going to happen? Yeah,
it does. I think Ohio State would be a very, very strong contender if he were to decide to transfer. And, the last I've heard today, Gary, it's pretty much been in a holding pattern right now. He's been leaning towards staying at Alabama. Could that change? Could it change over the next few days? Certainly could. But I know, like you said, there's a lot of Alabama fans really wondering what Caleb Downs will do.
All right, we'll keep an eye out for Caleb Downs. Hopefully he'll stay right here where he's already the freshman of the year and, played on an SEC championship team, college football playoff team. This new 4-2-5 defense that Kane Womack is going to bring in is very safety friendly, so hopefully he'll just stay right where he's at. All right, let's get to basketball. Alabama gets another win in the SEC, a huge road win this past Saturday night in Starkville against the Mississippi State team. Nate Oats said afterwards, hey, they pride themselves on toughness, and we out-toughed them. 82-74, they held the Bulldogs scoreless over the final 2:42 of the game. Mark Sears continues to do what he does. He leads the SEC in scoring. He had over 20. Alabama playing Missouri right now at Coleman Coliseum. Stu, will you give me that score again? 36-32 Alabama, late first half. So Mizzou 0-3 in the league, and Alabama 3-0, but Missouri hanging in. Alabama women's basketball will host the LSU Tigers on Thursday night. Now, LSU was knocked off this past Sunday, shocked down at Auburn, but Alabama had one of its poor performances of the game. They got off to a fast start against Arkansas, but in the second half, they just got clearly outplayed. They lose 77-59. That was a disappointment, as we said. LSU dropped its first SEC game of the year. The defending national champions falling 67-62 at Auburn. Now Bama gets them on Thursday night at 8 p.m. on the SEC network. That'll be a big one for the Tide. And still to come on TITV, only a few more weeks left for this season's Bama in the NFL, because we're down to the playoffs. Stick around to see who came up big during Wild Card Weekend. And up next, we'll be welcoming your phone calls, emails, and tweets. You see the information on the screen right there, 205-348-9882. There's the email address. We'd love to hear from you, Tider Insider Nation. Dial in. Get through to the program. We'll be right back. It's time for Bama in the NFL Wild Card Weekend, and boy, oh boy, I tell you what, Christian Harris for the Texans, Rodney, he was a beast in this game. He had a pick six, he had a sack, he had 8 tackles as Houston won 45-14, and they advanced to the divisional round where they'll face number 1 seed Baltimore in Baltimore on Saturday. In Detroit, the Lions won their first playoff game since 1991. Jahmyr Gibbs just keeps on scoring touchdowns. This one put the Lions up 14-3 as they beat the Rams 24-23. They get home field against the Buccaneers. Devontae Smith was awesome last night. Now, the Eagles lost, but he had 8 receptions for 148 yards, including this 55-yard catch. Philadelphia, though, their slump continued as they got blown out by the Bucs 32-9. All right, welcome back into TITV with Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris. Do want to mention that Kalen DeBoer did address the crowd at the basketball game tonight and, of course, got a standing ovation. Let's get out the phone calls. Sammy up in Walker County is going to lead us off tonight. Hey, Sammy.
Thanks, Gary, Rodney. And, Gary, I want to mention to you, thanks to Coach Saban for all the memories, and I think we got an excellent hire. And me and Rodney were having a conversation when Alabama made the playoffs, and Rodney was really talking about this Kalen DeBoer. And did I know about him? Of course, I didn't. But he was really high on him. But my question is, was Rodney Orr seen dancing in the streets when he heard that Kalen DeBoer got the job? Thanks, guys.
Well, I don't know about that, Sammy, but I'll tell you this. I was really excited because I think it was a great hire. I think he's one of the best young coaches in America, maybe the best available coach that Greg Byrne could have gotten. And, I think there's a lot of people out there, Gary, that thought when Nick Saban retired that Alabama was going to have a difficult time finding a new coach. When I look at this, I think it's, if you want to call it a home run hire, that's the way I feel about it, Sammy.
All right, thank you, Sammy. Let's get to Putty over in Alabaster. Hey, Putty.
Hey, Rodney. Hey, Gary.
Hey.
I just don't understand why nobody's really talking about the fact that DeBoer beat Texas just 3 weeks ago. That's an SEC team.
Yeah.
He's already beaten an SEC
Yeah, buddy.
team.
He's got a really good record against AP top 25 teams. Have you seen that? I think he's got one of the best records of any coach in their first 2 years at the FBS level. He's beat a lot of high-profile teams, Oregon, Texas, pretty much all comers, USC. So this guy's proven that I don't think X's and O's are going to be concerned with him, Rodney. It's just, can he handle the recruiting in this part of the country, deal with the SEC on a week-to-week basis, but there's no doubt he's familiar with big-time competition.
Yeah, he's beaten Texas. He beat Sark 2 years in a row, beat him in the bowl game last year, and then, of course, in the playoff game this year, the Sugar Bowl. He's gone against Dan Lanning a few times. He beat Lanning twice this year, beat Oregon twice, which is kind of difficult to do, to beat a really good team, in that rematch of the Pac-12 game. So, I'm with you, Putty. I think he's done an outstanding job against the competition that he's faced. And Gary mentioned his record against top 10 teams. He's also got a very impressive record, Gary. I'm not really sure what it is, but I think he's only lost one time when he was an underdog. He's he's had several major victories as an underdog. So, again, I don't think competition, that's not something I would be concerned about.
All right, more phone calls on our email of the day coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to TITV. Let's get to our email question of the day, brought to you by KDM Service Corporation. KDM Service Corporation serving your family like our family. Why did T-Rob go to Georgia, Brock in Tuscaloosa? Well, it's a good question, legit question. I don't know. Kirby swooped in here. He went. Then there was an effort by Coach DeBoer to get him back, and they offered him a lot of money, I understand. He decided to stay with Kirby, and, of course, Will Muschamp, his mentor, is over there as well. So that's about the best answer I can give you.
I think it's a really good answer, Gary. You mentioned Will Muschamp. The ties he's got to Muschamp, he was his defensive coordinator there at South Carolina. I think, maybe that was something that really lured him there, kept him there, whatever. But it's a surprise to some extent. But at the same time, Gary, I think they're going to put a really, really good defensive staff together.
All right, let's get out on the phone lines, get one more phone call. Greg is with us from over in Birmingham. Hey, Greg.
Hey, good evening, guys. I have a question. Can you talk about the support staff, all the analysts that are there? I know he's keeping the strength coach, et cetera, there. But what about the analysts? And has there been any thought? I don't know how old Charlie Strong is, but would he be a possibility to move on field maybe as a linebacker coach?
All right, Greg, we're having a hard time just keeping up with the coaches on the field. So, but yeah, Jeff Allen, the trainer, is expected to say David Ballou, the strength coach. Ellis Ponder, the director of football ops, should have a role. We got to wrap this up, Rodney. But as far as the analyst, I don't know. You don't get a ton of information on those guys.
So we'll just have to let it play out.
All right, we'll be back to wrap up TITV right after this. Alabama gymnastics off to a great start. They won a meet out in Las Vegas, a 4-team meet, and then the home opener last Friday night took down Mizzou with a score of 197.225. They host Arkansas this Friday night on the SEC Network at 6 p.m. That's going to do it for Tider Insider TV. A reminder, you can catch a replay tonight on WVUA 23 at 10:30 or find it anytime at WVUA23.com. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Thanks for watching, everybody. Good night.